Hello, welcome to this live Q&A on The Fight. My name is Ife Fatunase and I am from Human Rights Watch. Just to let you know, The Fight is available now on demand on digital platforms across the UK, Ireland and the US. I am joined by the directors of the film, Elise Steinberg and Eli Dupre. Also joining us is the ACLU's Dale Ho. Please send any of us Twitter questions or Instagram questions, making sure to tag Dogwolf in the tweets or Instagram posts. But send us your questions and let's get started. Elise, first question. Why did you think the ACLU would be a great subject to do? Secondly, how did you convince them to actually take part in this? And then I'd like to go to Dale to understand to give us a bit of an insight into the conversations that were being had at the ACLU about the pros and cons of being involved in a project like this. And if you could take us through some of those debates. But Elise, if you could please start with you.
Sure, hi. So the story of how this film came to be was that, as some of you who have seen the film will know, in the very opening scene, it was 7 days after Trump's inauguration when he enacted his Muslim ban. And on that night, I joined the protesters that were gathering on the steps of the Brooklyn courthouse. And inside, ACLU attorney Lee Gallant was arguing for an emergency stay of Trump's order. And when Lee emerged with his fist raised high, I was just steps away from him. And I could see the expression on his face. It was joy and shock and just in awe of the crowds of people that were chanting ACLU. And it was in that moment that I felt like this is the film that Eli and I and our co-director Josh, this is the film that we needed to make. We needed to be with Lee and Dale and the other lawyers at the ACLU in their fight against the Trump administration for the next 3 years. I felt like this was one of the biggest fight for civil liberties in my lifetime, and that I needed to document it. My mother was also a litigator who fought for immigrant rights. So the stories and the struggle of these lawyers just felt very familiar to me. So that was the moment. That was the eureka moment that we all had. And then in terms of how we got access, I'll let Eli tell you about how we got access.
Access was a challenge. It's a big building full of lawyers, and lawyers tend to be cautious. But Lee was our way in, and he sort of allowed us to connect with the other attorneys there. I think Elise's friend Kate Shaw was also instrumental in making introductions. And we met with them and said, you know, we're verite filmmakers. What we want is complete access. We want to be in every strategy session, in the halls of the ACLU, going home with the attorneys. We want to see everything about how this litigation goes down and what's involved. And they said that sounds amazing. We really respect that vision. There's no way that we're ever going to let you inside the ACLU. Forget it. And I think my partners in particular took that as a welcome starting point. And so it was a long discussion at that launched the discussion. I think, I mean, Dale can speak to this. I think what happened is they just came to recognize that this is a rare historical moment, and it really wants documenting. It was really, I think, the importance of the mission of showing what's going on at this unprecedented time convinced them, but maybe I'm wrong.
Dale, take us on the other side. What were those discussions like?
Well, the decision as to whether or not to participate in the documentary and let the filmmakers come in was made above my pay grade, I'll say. But I know that there was some reluctance initially. Not only is it kind of, our work, personal, but there's also confidentiality and privilege limitations on how much we can allow outsiders to come in and see our work and see our conversations. And I know some individual lawyers at the ACLU were concerned about both of those things, both whether or not it would be too disruptive to their work, consistent with their obligations to client confidentiality, and also too intrusive personally. But what I will say is that the filmmakers, Elise, Eli, and the cinematographer, Sean McGing, and Maya Seidler, who also worked on the film, was on site a lot, just did an incredible job of building trust with us. And I think over time, you know, a real strong relationship developed where we had a level of trust with them that allowed us to let them see, you know, sides of ourselves and of our work that we don't normally share with the outside world. And I think that's reflected in the candor with which the subjects, including myself in the documentary, speak.
So on that, I mean, just going to continue with Dale, with you, Dale. Just 147 cases. Eli, I'll come to you about how you chose those 4 and other ones that were considered, and if you could tell us a bit about those. But Dale, if you just start off by just giving us a comparison with, you know, you've filed 147 cases against the Trump administration. How does that compare with the Obama administration and previous administrations?
Well, it's true that the ACLU has sued every administration, every president, since, you know, over the last 100 years. The ACLU is fiercely nonpartisan, and every administration has committed civil rights and civil liberties violations, and we've always tried to hold the United States government accountable for those violations. But the current administration, and I think everyone sensed that on that first weekend that Elise was referring to, when the drama around the Muslim ban unfolded in airports around the United States, around the country, and at the federal courthouse in Brooklyn. This administration has presented over the last 3.5 years a threat to civil rights and civil liberties, unlike anything we've seen in at least a generation in this country. And it's not just on one issue or one set of issues, it's across the whole range of civil rights and civil liberties issues that the ACLU works on, whether it's access to abortion, LGBT rights, immigrants' rights, voting rights. We have just basically everything we do as an organization, we have been in firefighting mode over the last 3.5 years. And I think you can, you know, sense kind of the freneticism that we've been working when you watch the film.
And over to you, Eli, just on other cases that didn't make the cut.
There we go. Sorry. We did follow some cases that didn't make it into the film, but these 4 cases were really the biggest, most important fights going on at the center of the civil rights conflict in the United States, and they continue to be. So it was sort of a no-brainer to pick these 4 cases. What we didn't expect was that the attorneys at the front of these cases who are prosecuting these fights would be such a delightfully motley crew of quirky individuals. I think Dale has a line in the movie that there's more tattoos and piercings at the ACLU than at the DOJ. So I don't know if we'd followed some other law firm, if we'd get a bunch of like boring buttoned down attorneys. I don't know if it's a more Brooks Brothers world, but we were just delighted when we found Dale and Bridget and Lee and Josh and Chase, because they light up the screen. They're interesting, and they clearly are, you know, their hearts, they're living and dying by the fates of their clients. So these cases and these subjects, it was easy to pick them.
Fair enough. Elise, one of the questions, obviously, we've got an election coming up. Obviously, you were at the protest at the beginning, so I can guess who you're going to vote for, or I hope I can guess who you're going to vote for. But I'm interested in what you are hoping this film changes. And I mean by that, what are you hoping that viewers take away from this film? Viewers on both sides. I mean, on both sides of the electoral debate.
Sure. So I think, you know, after the election of President Trump, I think as a team, we all felt a little depleted. we felt a little hopeless. And I think one of the things that we wanted to do was make a film about heroes. And we did that. We were with these lawyers, and the thing that I felt every day when I was able to go into the ACLU office and film with these lawyers is I felt a sense of hope. It got me, I felt like, look at these guys. They're out there with, they're scrappy, and it's just a little bit of duct tape, and they're beating back the power of the federal government. And I found that very inspiring. And I think one of the things that we wanted to do with this film is give that hope and that inspiration to everybody, to share that, especially as we head into the election. There's so much at stake. And our hope is that it galvanizes people to take part in the process, to vote, and that it is a reminder that you don't need much to do something. You don't have to be, anybody can do something. And I think that was one of the goals. In yes, you get to see Dale arguing before the Supreme Court, and it's this incredible oral argument, but you also get to feel his vulnerability. And I think those are the things we can all relate to. And I hope that that is an invitation for everyone to take part.
I mean, Dale, with the election coming up, you must probably be the busiest lawyer at the ACLU right now. The conversation at the moment, obviously, is mail-in voting. Trump obviously recently said we should maybe move the election, ? I just want to know, if Elise and Eli were following you right now, what is your big fight at the moment? What would they be capturing? What are you fighting for ahead of November?
I think, what the several month period that of my work that's captured in the film is very different from what I've been doing over the last few months. Like everyone else, my life personally and the work that I do has been completely upended by the COVID-19 pandemic, and elections in the United States have been disrupted pretty substantially. We've had a series of state and local primary elections this spring and summer, which have been very, very challenging, with hours-long waits, polling place closures, shortages of poll workers. It's been really challenging. So whereas in the film I was kind of laser focused on a single case for about almost 12 months. Right now, we're scrambling. We're in a lot of different places at once. Normally, in an election year, my team is quite busy. We might file 3 to 6 new cases in the spring and the summer. We have filed 17 since the COVID-19 pandemic began, primarily related to issues involving the health and safety of voters, just trying to make sure that everyone can vote safely right now. For most people, that might entail voting by mail. So we're trying to open up access to mail-in voting right now. And then on top of this emergency situation, we have another controversy involving the census. Believe it or not, the president announced 2 weeks ago that even though there's no citizenship question on the census, he is going to seek to exclude undocumented immigrants from the census altogether. By what means, how, completely unclear, but the census is set to finish in less than 2 months. So we don't have a lot of time. We're scrambling once again. I spoke in court this morning, in court, virtually. It was my first time speaking in court since I argued in the Supreme Court, to get a schedule in our new round of census litigation. And we're trying to get it wrapped up by the beginning of September. So in 1 month, which is going to be a lot.
I think I was right when I said you're the busiest lawyer at the moment. One of the things, from the when I watched Wiener, there's that Wiener moment where everything's going well, and then there's that revelation and everything goes downhill. And I guess for this film, it was the Charlottesville section of the film where it all just looked as if it could start going downhill, and the situation was where the ACLU fought for the rights of white supremacists in Charlottesville to be able to protest. So I've got I guess my question, firstly to Dale and also to Eli, but first to Dale, I understand that the ACLU, I mean, I think that's probably the bit of the film that everyone was like, at the beginning going, the ACLU, ooh, but that's a bit of the film where everybody's like, ooh, I'm not so sure. So I do understand that the ACLU has fights for everyone, no matter if they agree with them or not. But I'm again interested in what that conversation was in the background, because clearly we saw in the film that it did cause a lot of debate, and there was a bit of, there was a lot of people within the ACLU that didn't agree with it. But how, in cases like that, Milo, Westboro, and Charlottesville have mentioned, how are those cases decided? What is the conversation? What do the conversations look like within the ACLU? And how are decisions? I mean, I think a lot of people want to know how those decisions are actually reached on who you fight for.
So you're absolutely right that there, historically and, particularly in recent years, been a lot of conversations about how we select our clients, which cases we decide to take. I wasn't personally involved in the conversations about any of those particular matters before we took on those clients. I was involved in some conversations that happened afterwards, and a lot of soul searching within the organization that took place. I will say it's great to be a part of an organization that, respects a wide range of views on these kinds of issues, and that is willing to reconsider where we've been before and where we're going to go in the future. There's one very, very strong current within the organization that we need to defend the rights of everyone, that includes people with whom we disagree politically. It must. That rights for the communities that we're trying to help can only be secured and preserved if we defend those rights on principle for everyone. I will say there's another current within the organization that recognizes that proposition kind of generally, but then asks a question about, in a world of scarce resources and limited attention, how do we make decisions? Is there a difference perhaps between the general principle of taking up the shield to defend unpopular groups who may espouse hateful or odious ideologies, and this particular moment when some groups who have racist, ultra right-wing, white nationalist ideologies are maybe not, in terms of power and access to power, similarly situated to, say, the Nazis in Skokie, Illinois in the 1970s. I think that's a legitimate debate to be having within the organization, that maybe the issue isn't simply defending the popular or defending the unpopular against the popular, but maybe we should be thinking about power dynamics and whether or not our resources are best expended upon groups that today are alarmingly surging in their power and think they have a sympathetic audience in the White House. And those are really hard questions. I don't want to judge my colleagues who are wrestling with those kinds of questions. I'll just say that I'm, for one, am pretty glad that I can steer clear of that and just focus on securing the right to vote for everyone in America.
And I guess, Eli, on that, I just want to know the thought process as your filmmakers on including that scene in the film, because I think until I watched the movie, I'd known about the protester who died, or I'd known about the car that'd gone through, but I'd never actually seen it in that graphic detail. And I just want to know why you included it in the film. What did you hope you would achieve, or what were your thought process behind that?
Sure. We couldn't not include it in the film. It was such a huge event in the ACLU's existence. It was a gut punch, both to the attorneys and to the country, to the United States as a whole. And I'm grateful to them both as a filmmaker and as a citizen to be willing to do what Dale just did, which is this self-examination and really. I think there's a bravery in being willing to attack an issue that with ambivalence and with nuance, and that's really sort of difficult to wrestle with and complex in front of the cameras. I mean, to be able to do that in public is it's not only incredibly compelling, I think is really, really important for us, as an audience, as a civilization, to be able to watch that that process unfold, you know, with heated emotions, but respectfully. I mean, I found it inspiring. Elise and Josh, I think feel the same. Yeah, it had to go in.
And I'm interested in your take on that as well, Lisa. You know, being the person who was at the protest and, you know, saw these heroes come out. How did it feel for you? So, like, what did you think about that whole, you know, the fact, what did you actually think about them taking on the case?
I feel like, you know, my experience and was very similar to the lawyers that we were following. It was, you know, going on in their cases and fighting the Trump administration on many different fronts. And then Charlottesville happened, and it was a real shocking moment. It was a painful moment. And what I saw was, you know, what Jill was talking about, a lot of heated kind of discussions and soul searching and questions. And I thought that it was, you know, that discussion needed to be in the film. And I think, you know, for me personally, one of the things that I think hit me was, you know, there's a lot of debate and discussions about rights. What does it mean to be a First Amendment absolutist? And what does it mean, you know, and how does that go into conflict with other areas? And one of the things you see in Charlottesville is that some of these debates, they aren't abstract. There are real lives at stake. And I think I just came away with how personal and how real these fights are. And, you know, I think my feeling mirrors just what we showed in the film, just that it's complicated and that there was this debate. And I'm very, one of the things that I love about the ACLU is that they allowed for that open debate, and that people were able to have different opinions.
Just a quick reminder to our viewers that you can send questions on Twitter, and you can also put some comments on the YouTube chat. And this is one for Dale. You know, Lee says, if you don't look at the negative stuff, when you know, we saw in the film, we saw the hate mail coming through, and Lee says, if you don't look at the negative stuff, you're stuck in your bubble. And Dale, you say, you know, you don't want to run from it. And I'm interested in, well, the question is interested in what do you learn from the hate mail, and what are you actually learning from it? What do you get from it?
You know, I think like everyone else who's self-critical, sometimes you experience some doubt about, you know, the worthiness of the work that you do. I think you can see from watching the film that our work does take a toll on us sometimes. The amount of, for me in particular, the time that I've had to spend on the road and kind of away from my family has been a bit of a challenge over the past decade or so. For me, seeing that kind of irrational vitriol on the other side, in some ways has the opposite effect, I think, of what the sender of that postcard you see me reading there wanted to have. It doesn't intimidate me. It doesn't make me shrink. If anything, it gives me more resolve that the cause that I'm fighting for is righteous and just, and that, you know, if the other side, all they have is that kind of hate, then I'm more sort of certain than ever that what I'm doing is the right thing.
Sorry, and another one for you, Dale. In the last line of the film, you say it's not just lawyers who are going to win this, it's going to be people. What does that action look like to you?
Well, when I think about our work, I as particularly over the last 3.5 years, like I haven't seen us in the position of advancing the cause of civil rights, making the world or America a more kind of just and inclusive place. Haven't been playing offense. We've been playing defense. We're seeing this incredible assault on civil rights and on people of color in particular in this country right now. And I have seen our role as holding the line, trying to prevent as many violations of civil rights, as many acts degrading the humanity of immigrants and people of color, other people of color, as we can, for as long as we can, with every tool at our disposal, until the kind of broader civic society can sort itself out. This is a really, really scary moment in our country's history, but it's also an amazing opportunity, I think, where the subtext of some of the nativist, xenophobic, racist subtext that has always existed in this country has become text and more visible and easier to identify and point out and name. And when I see the kind of incredible activism, for example, over the last few months around the killing of George Floyd and the movement for Black lives, it gives me incredible hope that the broader American public is kind of waking up to what's happening around us and making clear that we're not going to stand for it anymore. And if that translates into power at the polls, if it translates into different kinds of people getting elected, or the people who are getting elected listening in different ways and responding to these issues in different ways, then I think that's the real kind of change that we want.
Thanks, Dale. And a question for Elise and Eli. We'll start with Eli. How did you decide when each of the 4 lawsuits storylines should end? I think, well, obviously Dale's one was quite clear, but in all of them, how did you decide, and was it a difficult decision to make?
It's an interesting question, because a lot of these fights continue. Lee is still trying, the ACLU is working hard to reunite children, which is who were taken from their parents. And that whole effort has been complicated by COVID. They've been partnering with NGOs to go door to door in Central and South America, trying to find families. So, I mean, obviously these could go on forever. We were really looking for, I mean, a legal conclusion, something that felt like there was at least some sort of closure, for good or ill, with each of these stories. So the lovely thing from just a filmmaking standpoint, from telling a story narrative standpoint, is legal cases tend to have that. Somebody wins and somebody loses. They were not all, as you see in the film, happy endings. But they did all have a moment where our subjects could either take a victory lap or dust themselves off and charge back into the fight. So as soon as we had a good verdict, I think we knew that we could take a break and wait for the next movie.
And Elise, I'll give you the last word.
You mean about the ending and when we knew it was over?
Yes. What does over mean now? I mean, I'm going to give you the last word for the film, of basically when you knew it was over, and again, what you want people to do now. What do you want people to take away?
Okay. I think that we knew, what we were looking for in making this film was sort of 3 acts, and that, and when we felt like we had a somewhat of a decision. I know some of these cases we're still litigating, but we had a decision in a lot of the cases. We felt like, okay, we have the full structure of the stories, and so we also knew that we had to stop. We knew this film had to be come out now before the election. And in terms of the last word about what we hope people can take away with, I think, we opened this film with protesters in the street. And we end this film with what Dale was talking about, that change isn't going to happen with just lawyers and courts. It has to be people. And that's our message. I think one of the things we want people to take away is that people impact these decisions. We see that with the protesters in the street, and time again within American history. It's about people taking action that's going to affect change here. We need the courts, but we need the people too. And so that is one of our biggest hopes. Also, before we're over, I just want to give a shout out to Stacey Sullivan, who I know works at Human Rights Watch. And Stacey, and you guys were, Stacey, without this film, without Stacey, we would not have this film. And she was a tremendous supporter. You are so lucky that you have Stacey. Stacey, if you're watching, I love you. We love you. And this film would not be possible without her courage, empathy, and brilliance. So shout out Stacey.
To be fair, a lot of things wouldn't happen at Human Rights Watch without Stacey Sullivan. So that's completely understood. This Q&A is over. It's pretty much over because, as I say, Dale is the busiest lawyer in the world right now, or in America at least. But this Q&A has been hosted by Dog Wolf in collaboration with Human Rights Watch Film Festival, which hosts screenings, conversations on present-day human rights issues. To learn more, please go to ff.hrw.org. And again, just a reminder, the fight is available across on demand across digital platforms at thefightfilm.co.uk. Thanks for joining us. Take care.